At 23:40 on December 29, 1944, Major Carroll C. Smith crouched in the tight cockpit of his P-61 Black Widow at McGuire Field, Mindoro, eyes fixed on his radar operator, tracking a contact moving at 180 knots through the pitch-black skies north of the Philippine Islands. 26 years old, 43 combat missions, 4 confirmed kills. That night, the Japanese had sent 12 bombers to destroy the American airfields. Smith knew the pattern. For 2 weeks straight, Japanese bombers had assaulted Mindoro every night. 334 air raid alerts in 14 days. American engineers were working nonstop, building 2 airfields to support the Lingayen Gulf invasion. The Japanese understood the stakes. If American fighters could operate from Mindoro, they could protect the entire invasion force. The bombers had to be stopped. They came night after night, conventional bombers, kamikazes, anything carrying explosives. The 418th Night Fighter Squadron had arrived at Mindoro only 3 days earlier, on December 26th. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Smith's squadron was the only line of defense between those bombers and 20,000 American troops sleeping in tents below. The pressure was suffocating. Every bomber that slipped through meant dead engineers, destroyed construction, delayed airfields, and more casualties at Lingayen Gulf. Smith's P-61 was unlike anything the Japanese had faced. The Northrop Black Widow was the first American plane designed specifically for night combat. 66-foot wingspan, twin Pratt & Whitney, are 2,800 engines delivering 2,000 horsepower each, top speed 366 miles per hour. But its real weapon wasn't the 420mm cannons in the belly. It was the SCR-720 radar in the nose. It could detect aircraft up to 5 miles away in total darkness. The Japanese had no idea it existed. They flew at night thinking darkness made them invisible. They were wrong. The radar operator sat behind Smith in a separate compartment, eyes glued to a glowing screen showing every aircraft in range. Lieutenant Philip Porter, Smith's radar operator, had been tracking targets for 6 months. He knew how to read the scope, vector Smith toward enemies, and distinguish friend from foe. The challenge was clear: 1 P-61 against 12 Japanese bombers. Engaging one meant the other 11 could reach the airfields. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Even if Smith shot down 3 or 4, the rest could complete their mission. Casualties would mount. Airfields would be damaged. The invasion schedule could slip. Smith had trained for this moment for 18 months. Night Fighter School at Orlando Army Airfield, radar intercept procedures, total darkness gunnery, night navigation. Night fighting was the deadliest form of aerial combat. No visual references, no horizon, just instruments, radar, and the hope the target wasn't friendly. The 418th had flown its first missions in November 1943 from primitive strips in New Guinea, starting with P-70 Havocs, then modified P-38 Lightnings with experimental radar. P-61s arrived in September 1944. The Black Widow was everything the earlier night fighters weren't: stable, forgiving, powerful. The radar worked. But radar alone wouldn't solve tonight's problem. 12 bombers were inbound. Smith's fuel would last maybe 3 hours. If he spent 10 minutes per target, he could intercept only 3 before returning to base. 9 bombers could get through, meaning hundreds or even thousands of casualties if they hit fuel or ammo dumps. At 23:42, Porter's voice crackled through the intercom. For contacts, all heading south toward Mindoro, each at a different altitude. Smith had to decide which bomber first, and was his plan to intercept all 4 genius or suicide. He pushed the throttles forward. The twin R-2800S responded instantly. The Black Widow climbed at 2,000 feet per minute. Porter called out vectors, heading 035, altitude 8,000 feet, range 4 miles. Outside, nothing, just darkness, no moon, no stars, thick clouds. The Japanese chose this night carefully. Darkness made their bombers invisible to normal fighters. But Smith's P-61 wasn't normal. The SCR-720 radar used a rotating parabolic dish in the nose, sending out 180 degrees forward microwave pulses. When a pulse struck an aircraft, it bounced back. On the operator's scope, the return appeared as a glowing blip. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. 2 displays showed azimuth, left or right, and elevation, above or below the plane. Porter watched both, guiding Smith with precise verbal corrections. Left 5 degrees, down 3. Range 3 miles. Smith activated his radar scope. A smaller display was built into the main instrument panel. When the target drew close, Smith could track it himself. His pilot scope was simpler than Porter's, just a single display showing range and relative position, but it was enough. Once the target appeared on his scope, he could close in for the kill without relying on verbal directions. The Japanese bomber was a Mitsubishi G4M, known to the Americans as Betty. Twin 2,000 horsepower Mitsubishi engines, top speed 270 miles per hour, crew of 7, bomb load 1,760 pounds. But the Betty had a fatal flaw: no self-sealing fuel tanks. One well-placed burst from Smith's cannons could turn it into a fireball. At 2 miles, the target blips steadied on his scope. The bomber crew had no idea he was behind them. Japanese bombers had no tail-warning radar, nothing to detect a pursuing night fighter. They flew in darkness, thinking they were safe. The P-61 made that assumption deadly. Smith closed to 1,000 yards but still couldn't see the Betty with his eyes. The night was absolute. He relied entirely on the radar. The blip grew larger as he approached. 800 yards, 700, 600. At 500 yards, the bomber became visible, a dark shape against slightly lighter clouds. Its exhaust flames flickered faint orange, barely visible in the darkness. Smith maneuvered the Black Widow slightly below and behind the bomber. The 420mm Hispano M2 cannons were fixed in the lower fuselage. He had to aim the entire aircraft. Using the N6 gun sight projected onto a combining glass in his panel, he adjusted until the bomber was centered in the reticle. At 400 yards, Smith armed the cannons. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Each carried 200 rounds, 800 total, enough for about 40 seconds of continuous fire. But doctrine called for short, precise bursts. Get close, fire, confirm the kill, then move to the next target. Wasting ammo on one bomber meant fewer rounds for the others. At 350 yards, Smith squeezed the trigger. The 4 cannons roared, 20mm shells streaming at 2,800 feet per second. Tracers streaked red across the darkness. 2 seconds, 12 rounds per cannon, 48 shells total. The Betty's right wing exploded, fuel igniting instantly. It rolled right into a steep dive. Smith watched the burning bomber illuminate the clouds below as it crashed into the water 8 miles north of Muro at 23:57. 1 bomber down, 11 to go. Fuel consumption showed 15% gone, and 3 more contacts remained on Porter's scope, all heading toward the airfields, miles apart. Smith had exactly 112 minutes of fuel remaining. At 0014 on December 30th, Porter identified the second target, heading 180, altitude 6,000 feet, range 6 miles. Smith turned the P-61 south and descended. Geometry was a challenge. The second bomber was 23 miles from the first. At a cruising speed of 280 miles per hour, that meant 5 minutes to intercept. 5 minutes during which the bomber drew closer to Muro, closer to the airfields, closer to completing its mission. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. He pushed the Black Widow to 320 miles per hour. High-power settings burned fuel fast. 3 minutes of patrol lost for every minute at full throttle. But if he didn't catch the bomber quickly, it could reach the target, drop its bombs, and his mission would fail. Night interception math was brutal. Most missions ended without contact. The sky was vast. Even with radar, finding one bomber required perfect coordination between pilot and operator. Finding 4 in a single night was near impossible. Since arriving in the Pacific, the 418th Night Fighter Squadron had 18 kills in 14 months. Smith had 4 already. Adding 4 more tonight would make him the top American night fighter ace, but records didn't matter. Stopping these bombers did. Porter called corrections. Smith adjusted heading. The contact grew stronger on the radar. Range 4 miles, 3-2. At 1 mile, Smith saw it, another Betty, same profile, same vulnerability. Lower than the first, 6,000 feet instead of 8,000, closer to the cloud layer, leaving less maneuvering room. Smith positioned the P-61 below and behind. The intercept had to be perfect. Too fast and he'd overshoot, too slow, and the bomber might spot him. Night fighters depended on surprise. If the enemy saw you, everything changed. Evasive action, gunners opening fire, a clean intercept turning into a dogfight. At 500 yards, the Betty became clear, a dark shape against the night sky. The crew flew straight and level, unaware. The Black Widow's black paint rendered it nearly invisible in the darkness. The P-61's engines were quiet compared to most fighters. The Japanese called it the Black Widow and feared it, but fear only mattered if they knew it was coming. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Smith centered the target in his gun sight. Range 350 yards. He fired. A 2-second burst, 48 rounds. The shells tore through the Betty's fuselage. The right engine ignited instantly, followed by the left. Both wings erupted in flames. The bomber nosed over and plunged toward the ocean. Smith watched it fall. It crashed into the water at 0019. 17 minutes past midnight. 2 bombers down, 10 remaining. Fuel gauge read 42% remaining. Porter had 2 more contacts on his scope, both closer to Muro than the previous targets, at different altitudes, one at 9,000 feet, the other at 4,008 miles apart. Smith made a decision, take the higher target first. Climbing used less fuel than a rapid descent, but the higher bomber was farther north. Pursuing it meant letting the lower bomber draw closer to the airfields. One wrong choice and a bomber could slip through. The mission would fail. He turned north and climbed. The P-61 reached 9,000 feet at 0023. Porter locked onto the third contact, range 7 miles, heading 160, speed 190 knots. But this bomber was different, faster than a Betty, taking evasive action, turning, changing altitude. Someone aboard new night fighters were present. The third bomber was a Nakajima Ki-49 Donu, called Helen by the Americans. Faster than a Betty, max speed 306 miles per hour, better defensive guns, 57.7 millimeters machine guns, a clear field of fire from the tail. Approaching directly behind would put Smith in the gunner's sights. Smith adjusted. Instead of coming straight in, he approached from below and to the left, into the bomber's blind spot. Most Japanese bombers had weak ventral coverage. The belly was vulnerable. Smith exploited it. Range close to 1 mile. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The Helen continued evasive maneuvers, left, right, climbing 200 feet, descending 300. The pilot was experienced, knowing straight and level flight made his aircraft easy prey. Porter predicted the bomber's movements, watching patterns and anticipating turns. Smith closed to 600 yards. The Helen made a sharp right turn. Smith followed. The P-61's twin-boom design provided excellent stability, responding smoothly to inputs. He kept the bomber centered in his gun sight. 500 yards, 450, 400. At 375 yards, the tail gunner opened fire. Tracers streaked past Smith's canopy. Surprise was gone. He had seconds before evasive action escalated. He squeezed the trigger. A 3-second burst, 72 rounds, longer than previous attacks, necessary due to the bomber's maneuvers. The 20mm shells tore through the fuselage. The right engine exploded. The Helen rolled inverted and went into a spin. Smith pulled away to avoid debris. The burning bomber fell through 9,000 feet, 8,000, 7,000, striking the water at 0029. 29 minutes past midnight. 3 bombers down, 9 remaining. Fuel at 28%, critical. Most pilots returned at 30%. Below that, any delay risked a forced landing or worse. Over open ocean at night, running out of fuel meant certain death. No visual references, no way to judge altitude. The aircraft would hit water before the pilot realized. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Porter had one final contact, heading 170, altitude 4,000 feet, range 9 miles. This was the low-altitude bomber Smith had bypassed earlier. Now only 12 miles from Muro, he could see searchlights from the airfields, thin beams sweeping the sky. Anti-aircraft gunners were ready, fingers on triggers. Smith descended toward the 4th bomber. Diving conserved fuel. The P-61 dropped through 8,000, 7,000, 6,000, 5,000 feet, leveling off at 4,200, slightly above the target. The altitude advantage gave him a better attack angle, using gravity to increase speed and reduce reaction time. Range 4 miles, 3-2. At 1 mile, he saw the bomber, Betty, flying straight toward Muro. No evasive action. The pilot either didn't know night fighters were present or ignored the risk, accepting death to complete the mission. Smith positioned the P-61 below and behind 350 yards. He checked his ammo, 512 rounds remaining, enough for 3 more attacks, maybe 4 if conservative. This was the 4th target. Every shot had to count. Fuel red 23%, below safety margins. If he missed, there wouldn't be enough to pursue again. 1 chance, 1 burst, then he had to return to base. At 0034, Smith fired. A 2-second burst, 48 rounds. The 20mm shell slammed into the Betty's center fuselage. The port wing tore away. Fuel tanks ruptured. Flames raced across the remaining structure. The bomber rolled left and plunged toward the ocean, impacting at 0035, 35 minutes past midnight. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. 4 bombers destroyed in 55 minutes. Smith turned the P-61 back toward Muro. Fuel gauge read 21%. The math was simple. McGuire Field, 18 miles south, consumed about 100 gallons at cruise speed. He had roughly 60 gallons left, enough for 36 minutes of flight, barring problems. Porter scanned the radar. Nothing. The remaining 8 Japanese bombers had turned back. Whether from fear or caution didn't matter. The mission was accomplished. 4 kills, 0 American casualties. The airfields were secure. Construction crews could work uninterrupted. The Lingayen Gulf invasion schedule remained intact. But Smith's night wasn't over. At 0042, Porter picked up a new contact, heading north. Range 4 miles, altitude 7,000 feet. Smith checked his position 12 miles from McGuire Field. Fuel at 19%. The contact lay between him and the base. If it was a bomber, it was heading for the airfields he had just defended. Engaging it would risk running out of fuel. Letting it go could cost American lives. Numbers didn't matter if someone died because he chose his own safety over the mission. Smith turned toward the contact. Porter called vectors. Range closed quickly, 3 miles, 2-1. At 800 yards, Smith acquired the target visually. Not a bomber, it was a Nakajima Ki-84 Hay-8 called Frank by the Americans. A single-engine fighter, max speed 392 miles per hour, 4 12.7mm machine guns, 2 20mm cannons. One of Japan's best fighters, faster and more maneuverable than the P-61 with better climb. In daylight, a skilled Frank pilot could outfight a Black Widow. But this was night, and the Frank had no radar. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. It flew blind, searching with visual references that didn't exist. Smith had the advantage. The Frank pilot didn't know he was there. He positioned the P-61 below and behind. Range 500 yards. Approach identical to the bomber intercepts. Get close, fire, confirm the kill. Fighters were smaller, harder to hit, and armored around a cockpit and engine. 2 seconds might not suffice. He closed to 300 yards. Fuel, 17%. A missed shot meant disengaging immediately, hoping to reach McGuire Field. Miss, and the Frank would know night fighters were present, making future intercept harder. Smith centered the Frank in his gun sight. Finger on the trigger. Engaging would drop fuel to 15%, below minimum safety, but letting it go risked American lives. Engines hummed at 320 miles per hour. The Frank flew straight and level, unaware. At 0045, Smith decided. He squeezed the trigger. A 3-second burst, 72 rounds, the longest of the night. The shells tore through tail and engine cowling. Flames burst from the engine, black smoke pouring out. The fighter rolled right in dove. Smith watched it descend through 7,000, 6,000, 5,000 feet. Flames grew larger. At 3,000 feet, the pilot ejected. The parachute opened, white against black sky. The Frank hit the water at 0046. Fuel gauge, 15%. The engagement had burned more than expected. McGuire Field was 11 miles south. At cruise, he had 22 minutes remaining, enough to reach the airfield with minimal reserves, but any error could be catastrophic. Porter guided him with radar. The island appeared on the scope. McGuire Field lay on the southwestern coast, operational only 4 days, minimal lighting, no instrument landing system. Pilots relied on a single row of kerosene lamps. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. From 5 miles out, the lights were just dim yellow dots. Smith descended to 2,000 feet. Fuel 13%, 84 gallons remaining. At cruise, 18 minutes of flight time. 8 miles from the airfield, at 280 miles per hour, about 1.7 minutes to reach the landing pattern. Enough, barely. At 0052, he spotted the runway lights, 12 dim lamps in a line. The runway, 5,000 feet of crushed coral, had been completed December 26th, the same day the 418th arrived. Adequate for P-61s but lacking safety features, no overrun area, no crash barriers. Too fast or too slow, and the aircraft could overshoot. At night, with minimal lighting, any mistake could be fatal. Smith entered the landing pattern at 1,000 feet. Fuel 11%, 57 gallons. Approach consumed fuel faster. Engine spool changes used additional gallons. Calculations left roughly 12 minutes, enough unless something went wrong. At 0055, it did. All 12 runway lamps went out simultaneously. Complete darkness. Smith was 3 miles from the runway, altitude 800 feet, airspeed 140 knots. Without lights, no visual reference remained. The P-61 would hit the ground before he realized how low he was flying. Porter suggested the radar altimeter, measuring height above ground with radio waves, accurate within 50 feet. Smith could descend slowly using the altimeter and dead reckoning, touching down when it read 0. A dangerous technique. Any error in navigation could mean landing off the runway, into trees, coral reefs, or construction equipment. Fuel gauge read 9%, 46 gallons, 8 minutes of flight time. Not enough to divert. Taqabad on Leh, the nearest alternative, was 90 miles northeast. The P-61 would run out of fuel 40 miles short. One option remained: land at McGuire Field without runway lights, or risk the ocean. The decision was simple. Smith had survived 4 intercepts, scored 5 kills in 55 minutes, the highest single-night total for any American night fighter pilot in the Pacific. He had saved lives, protected airfields, and ensured the Lingayen Gulf invasion schedule remained intact. Dying now would render it all meaningless. He turned the P-61 toward where he believed the runway lay. Altitude 600 feet, fuel 9%. Darkness below was absolute. Descending to 400 feet, the radar altimeter read 380 feet. Airspeed 120 knots. Stall speed with full flaps 95 knots. A 25-knot margin, not much, but slower would burn too much fuel. The math left no room for error. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Porter monitored the radar. Moro's coastline was visible. McGuire Field lay inland, roughly a mile from the beach. Using the compass, Smith navigated north to south, runway heading 180 degrees. If he miscalculated, he'd land in jungle, coral, or construction zones. At 0058, Smith lowered the landing gear. 3 green lights confirmed wheels down and locked, main gear under each engine, nose gear forward. The P-61's gear was sturdy, built for rough fields, but without visual cues, he couldn't judge the touchdown point. Too hard, the gear could collapse. At 120 knots, the crew might not survive. Fuel gauge, 7%, 36 gallons, 5 minutes remaining. Full flaps lowered airspeed to 110 knots. Descent rate, 300 feet per minute. Radar altimeter, 250, 200, 150 feet. No lights, no visual references, just instruments and hope. At 100 feet, Smith reduced power. Descent rate climbed to 400 feet per minute. 75, 50, 25 feet. He prepared for touchdown. Hands gripped the control column, feet on rudder pedals, ready for corrections. The P-61's main wheels struck the crushed coral at 0059. Harder than normal, but the gear held. Nose will touch 3 seconds later. Brakes applied, 180, 60, 40 knots. Taxi speed, 20 knots. Smith couldn't see his position on the runway. He kept brakes on until fully stopped. Fuel gauge, 6%, 29 gallons, 3 minutes remaining. Ground crew arrived with flashlights, guiding him to the parking area. Engine shut down at 0103, 1 hour and 3 minutes after takeoff. Smith climbed out, legs stiff, hands shaking, not from fear, but exhaustion. 5 intercepts, 5 kills, 1 blind landing, all in 63 minutes of combat. Porter emerged from the radar compartment. He had tracked 5 targets, vectored Smith, maintained contact. Without Porter, none of the kills would have been possible. Night fighting was teamwork, pilot and radar operator in perfect coordination. Ground crew inspected the P-61, no damage. All 4 cannons functioned. Ammunition expended, 408 rounds. Smith had started with 800, 392 remained, enough for 2 more intercepts, but 0 fuel for additional targets. At 0115, intelligence officers arrived, requesting details, times, locations, altitudes, aircraft types. Smith recalled from memory 4 Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers, 1 Nakajima Ki-49 Helen bomber, 1 Nakajima Ki-84 Frank fighter, destroyed between 2357 on December 29th and 0046 on December 30th. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Engagement time, 49 minutes. Kills confirmed by radar, coast watchers, and wreckage. 4 bombers, 1 fighter, exactly where Smith reported. 4 kills equaled the American night fighter record. But Smith's day wasn't done. At 14:30 on December 30th, 1944, Japanese reconnaissance aircraft were spotted over Muro. Single-engine fighters, faster and harder to intercept than bombers. Smith and Porter took off again in the same P-61, refueled, rearmed, 800 rounds, 646 gallons of fuel. At 15:12, Porter detected a contact, heading north, altitude 12,000 feet, range 8 miles. Smith climbed to intercept. The target, another Nakajima Ki-84 Frank fighter, faster in level flight than the P-61, but Smith held the altitude advantage. Any error in navigation could mean landing off the runway, into trees, coral reefs, or construction equipment. Fuel gauge read 9%, 46 gallons, 8 minutes of flight time. Not enough to divert. Takabad on Leh, the nearest alternative, was 90 miles northeast. The P-61 would run out of fuel 40 miles short. One option remained: land at McGuire Field without runway lights, or risk the ocean. The decision was simple.
At 0115, intelligence officers arrived, requesting details, times, locations, altitudes, aircraft types. Smith recalled from memory 4 Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers, 1 Nakajima Ki-49 Helen bomber, 1 Nakajima Ki-84 Frank fighter, destroyed between 2357 on December 29th and 0046 on December 30th. Engagement time, 49 minutes. Kills confirmed by radar, coast watchers, and wreckage. 4 bombers, 1 fighter, exactly where Smith reported. 4 kills equaled the American night fighter record, but Smith's day wasn't done. At 1430 on December 30, 1944, Japanese reconnaissance aircraft were spotted over Muro. Single-engine fighters, faster and harder to intercept than bombers. Smith and Porter took off again in the same P-61 refueled, rearmed, 800 rounds, 646 gallons of fuel. At T-1512, Porter detected a contact, heading north, altitude 12,000 feet, range 8 miles. Smith climbed to intercept. The target, another Nakajima Ki-84 Frank fighter, faster in level flight than the P-61, but Smith held the altitude advantage. He dove on the Frank from above. The diving attack accelerated the P-61 to 390 mph, faster than the Frank's maximum level speed. Smith fired at 400 yards. 2-second burst, 48 rounds. The Frank's engine exploded.
If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more.
The fighter rolled, inverted, and plunged into the ocean. Smith's 7th kill, that final victory, made him the top-scoring American night fighter ace of World War II. 7 confirmed kills, all achieved in less than 24 hours of combat flying. No other American night fighter pilot in any theater would match that total. The 418th Night Fighter Squadron continued operations from Morro through January 1945, scoring 18 kills, the highest total of any P-61 squadron in the Pacific. Smith's 7 kills accounted for 39% of the squadron's total. Porter received the Distinguished Flying Cross for his exceptional work as radar operator. His skill making every intercept possible. The P-61 times, a Watson continued flying combat missions through May 1945. The aircraft survived the war undamaged, but like most Black Widows, it was eventually scrapped. Only 4 P-61s exist today, none of them Smiths. The nose art, the kill markings. The aircraft that hunted 4 bombers in 80 minutes, all lost to history. McGuire Field supported the Lingayen Gulf invasion as planned. American forces landed on January 9, 1945. P-51 Mustangs and P-47 Thunderbolts operating from Morro provided air cover. The airfield Smith defended on December 29 enabled that coverage. Engineers estimated that if Japanese bombs had struck the construction areas, completion would have been delayed by 2 weeks. 2 weeks that could have cost lives and extended the war. Smith survived the war. He returned to the United States in February 1946, left the military, became a civilian, never sought publicity, and never wrote memoirs. The only records of his achievement exist in military archives, unit histories. Intelligence reports, the dry documentation of confirmed kills and completed missions. The P-61 Black Widow proved the potential of night fighters. 700 aircraft built, deployed in every theater: Europe, Pacific, China, Burma, India, Mediterranean. The aircraft dominated night combat from 1944 through 1945. After the war, the P-61 was redesignated F-61, remained in service until 1954, then retired, replaced by jet-powered night fighters. But in December 1944, over Morro, the Black Widow was the most advanced night fighter in the world, and Carroll Smith was the best pilot flying it. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Every like tells YouTube to share these forgotten stories with more people. Subscribe and turn on notifications.
If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more.
We're rescuing real stories from dusty archives, everyday stories of pilots who saved lives with radar. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from: United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia. Our community stretches across the world. You're not just a viewer, you're helping keep these memories alive. Tell us if someone in your family served. Thank you for watching, and thank you for ensuring Major Carroll Smith's legacy doesn't disappear. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.